There's different types of entities, such as number one, a C corporation, and by default, when you file a corporation, most people file by default, it's a C corporation. Some people will file as an S corporation, which is a specific tax election that a C corp makes to become an S corporation. And then number three, we have an LLC, and as we'll discover, the LLC actually files a multitude of ways, and it's really confusing. And number four, we have a trust, and number five, a limited partnership. Okay, so we'll start with the basic one. A C corporation, which is called an ordinary corporation, is formed by filing with the Secretary of State certain forms and going through some specific procedures, and then it files its own tax return annually. It has owners we call shareholders. It has officers, president, secretary, treasurer, and so forth. And if used properly, a C corporation can save you a lot of money. If used improperly, there's some negative tax consequences. But either way you do it, whether it's a C corporation or an S corporation, they're both corporations and they both protect the owners, the shareholders, from liability for anything that goes wrong in the company business. So a C corporation has shareholders and it files a tax return. And then an S corporation also files a tax return. But the main difference between a C and an S corporation is, in a C corporation, you can get double taxed, meaning the corporation can pay tax, and then if you take it out as a dividend to the shareholders are then taxed a second time. You may have heard that before, that a C corporation is bad, but if properly used, can save you money. An S corporation, on the other hand, files an informational tax return, a different one than a C corp files. And then all of the income and expenses are passed through to the shareholders as either a profit or a loss, just a net number, profit or loss. So the general rule is here, if you're making more money than you can spend, meaning the corporation, let's say, makes a net profit of 100 and you only need to live on 50, then you're going to go with a C corporation because you can get certain tax benefits that are not available in an S corp. In an S corporation, if you're taking out all of the money that you're spending and you're netting it out to a net zero anyway, then you go with an S corporation. So you probably figured most people start their business as an S corporation, and when they start making some serious change, then they go to a C corporation. So for most of you, you'll probably be starting with an S corporation in the picture of what you're doing. Okay? Now we have an LLC, and now the interesting thing about an LLC is there's 4 different ways that it can be taxed. An LLC files with the state like a corporation. Like a corporation, its owners, which we call members, are protected from liabilities of the company. So C corporation, S corporation, LLC all enjoy the same protection for its owners, limited liability. However, the LLC does not have a tax return. There's no such thing as an LLC tax return. The LLC will choose how it wants to be treated for tax purposes by the IRS. And among the 4 ways, we're not going to talk about all 4, but the most important ones are, it could be a corporation or it could be a partnership. Now, as a corporation, it could be C or S, so it can be a C or S corporation, or it can be a partnership. There's actually a 4th way, but not good for our use here in the discussion, so we'll just ignore that 4th one. So if it elects to be a corporation, it files a corporation return. If it elects to be a partnership, it files a partnership return. Then we have a trust, and a trust is really not an entity at all. A trust is an agreement. It's a written agreement between 2 parties, the person who creates the trust and the person who manages the trust. So we have the creator, called the grantor, and then we have the trustee, who's going to manage it. It's just a written agreement that says trustee is going to manage stuff for the person who created it. Now, people get a little confused with trust. They compare a trust to like a corporation, which has a filing and a tax return. A trust, the type we're going to use, doesn't have any of those things. Doesn't have a tax ID number, doesn't have a bank account, doesn't file tax returns. It's simply an arrangement where one person holds property for another. Now, if you think back to the beginning stages of trusts, back in England, and years and years ago, if you owned property in your own name, you had to go fight in the King's Army. So what someone would do is put the property in a friend or relative's name who's too old, and says, "Look, we'll put it in your name, and so therefore you won't have to fight because you're too old, and I won't have to fight because I don't own the property. But between me and you, I still own it, but we'll put it in your name." And that's basically what a trust is. You're taking title in one person's name for the benefit of someone else. And for tax purposes, the trustee is not the owner. The one who set it up is really the owner. And we'll get back to that in a little bit, and you'll see why that's important and relevant. And lastly, we have what's called a limited partnership, which again is like a partnership here. And sometimes we use what's called a family limited partnership, which is an asset protection device to avoid liability, but also avoid people getting to your stuff if they get a judgment against you.